Hello, everyone. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you all so much. It is unbelievable the amount of donations that have come in the last really 12 hours as Facebook once again optimized our fundraiser. So I want to encourage you all to keep sharing it, keep inviting it, keep liking, keep donating if you feel moved to do so, and tell people about it that are not on Facebook, particularly because they can donate directly to the Lawyers Committee. So I want to thank everybody, and I want to say, we are truly on our way to $250,000. And the messages that you have been sending us have really been keeping us going. And I just want to share some of the public ones in particular, people who are just telling us that Facebook was suggesting that they come to the site, and they were so excited to see that we've been keeping people updated with the amounts and the things that the Lawyers Committee have been doing, and just the excitement. And one message that struck me today in particular that came in that said, it is not enough to wish for justice, right? And I think that's really important in light of some of the things that we've also been experiencing, which is some of the anger emojis, some of the not so nice messages, just a real reminder of the work that everyone is putting in, and the fact that working for justice is critical. People fear justice and they fear Blackness, and these are the things that we at Juneteenth really want to celebrate. But all in all, we've had over 4,700 donations. 18,000 people have invited friends to the fundraiser, and we've had 8,200 shares. I want to give you a little bit of context about celebrating Juneteenth. It commemorates the Union Army proclaiming that all slaves in Texas were free, and this happened on June 19, 1865. But I think one important aspect of thinking about Juneteenth is that slavery was still legal and practiced in two Union border states until December 6, 1865. And I think the reason why that is so important to think about in the context of Juneteenth is that freedom is something that had to be worked towards, and we have to think about the incompleteness of July 4th for many as Independence Day. So we get, in a sense, a head start on the calendar year in our celebration of freedom, but we think about this as an eventual and a gradual process. Now, I didn't learn about Juneteenth until high school, but it made perfect sense to me, and it's been exciting for me to see it spread and take on new meaning, particularly as we empower and celebrate the work that people are doing to demand and gain their freedom despite all circumstances. When you think about the protests now happening in a time of complete unrest, both political and health-wise, being free is something that we work towards, and it's important to take days like today just to go ahead and celebrate that. I think about the celebration of Juneteenth as a celebration of that Black liberation. And I was lucky to be from just outside of Richmond, Virginia. That is a city and a region with a vibrant Black community. So that is something that was really important to me. We had urban communities, suburban communities, and rural communities. And at the same time, Richmond, Virginia was the capital of the failed Confederacy. So we see these tensions playing out right now with respect to both protests in Richmond and conversations about those monuments coming down and being moved. And this experience and this juxtaposition is what I teach. And my lens on it is the everyday beauty of Black people. I focus on the Black imagination, the actual dreams of what we are and what we can be. We are reclaiming our history. We are reclaiming our legacy, our futures, and I love to see it. So one of the questions that I pose to my students, and I really would love people to share their definitions and questions about this, is what does it mean to even be Black? It's a beautiful and a brilliant, but it's also an impossible question. Why do we study blackness is another way of framing it. And so as we all come up with our individual definitions and contributions to what does it mean to be black, I can really say part of the main reason we study blackness, all of us, not just black people, people who identify as black, but everyone, is that in studying the black experience, we study our full humanity. It is a study of imagination and joy and the absolute triumph over unimaginable horrors. So another way I love to frame this is asking people for their own experiences, their personal narratives, their collective narratives of why they like to be black. This is one of my research questions. This really allows us to get a more comprehensive idea and living model of how my blackness is different than other people's blackness, but it's all individually and collective beautiful. So when I ask people the first time, why do you like being black? A lot of people say, I like everything about it, right? They're going to tell you everything. So I think that's really an important aspect of hearing this narratives and hearing these stories. But some things that, come out shared is that as black people, one of the collectives is that Africa gives us roots and our wings expand across the diaspora. And we also understand that our story and our history is that all at once a mashup of sadness and joy. So we can really celebrate this in a sense through affirmation. Just taking the time to celebrate these concepts, to ask each other to comment about them on this Juneteenth. We need to hear it. We need to state the joy in our blackness. We need to see it. We need to feel it. We need to taste it. And we need to touch it. One really important part to think about in all of this, particularly given the pandemic and the protests, is that our definitions of blackness are not focused on our racism, our sadness, and our pain. If you think about that in an ethics model, that is just the pathos, right? The sadness and the despair that a lot of people must pay attention to. Is their everyday reality, but it's amplified by people who consume it in news forms, social media. But I would say that is not the defining model, and we even reclaim that, I would argue, and in our art and musical forms, and one I like to think about that embodies that pain is blues music. You can't pin black people down, and I was thinking about that in an ethics model. That's just logo, so logic. If you're trying to say what black is or what black isn't, my argument is always, we're just too magical for that. To capture blackness for me, we have to think about our communities, our choices, and our convictions. So for me, my blackness is my ethos. These are the guiding beliefs or ideals that characterize me and my blackness in a community, in a given nation, and among a different various sets of ideas. And so the process or frame for that for me is that blackness is joy. It's the magic. It's the soulful and the spiritual resistance that says in any given moment, you may be oppressing me, but I do not want your crumbs. And so I'll appeal to ethics as I kind of think about constructing these definitions. But the things to me that make the black so beautiful, and my focus today is an appeal to the aesthetics. And this is a real challenge because the black body was subjugated for so long, particularly for consumption and for use, that I feel like blackness right now, from the Black is Beautiful movement in the 60s till today, is a constant challenge to reclaim the body and make it all our own. And I think this is why affirmations and calling up these different aspects is so important. So my idea today is that I don't want to call out so many just focusing on individual items as much to invoke them so that you can celebrate them and go learn about them. And if you have favorites, as I kind of think about these different forms, excuse me, put them in the chat so we can all learn. And if you don't know about something, ask. I'll put in examples of all these different art forms over the weekend for sure. So I think about art, I think about all of the different types of art that is embodied in the Black experience. I think about one that is so collective and so universal for so many Black people is food, and that's the everyday consumable art of nourishing. nourishment. That's taking something that is required and necessary and making it an art form, both in the process of creating the food, from growing it, and the art forms that we brought from Africa and in times of enslavement, and learning how to deal with little bits of food and learning how to nurture the land and supporting the United States and other countries through our skill, on through the cooking and the different types of dishes. So those vary from black person to black person in terms of their preferred dishes and how they make them, but it's the communal experience of the creation of the food and the consumption that I think particularly is worth more study and more discussion and learning more about. Music, from the solo voice to the gospel choir to the pop singers that we all listen to or at least know about, from hip hop to jazz to classical music and the reclamation of the world's beats, right? This is the music and this is the black experience that is accompanied by the art, from the everyday art we create on walls to now our presidential portraits, thanks to Kehinde Wiley. The literature, from poetry to hip hop, great American novels and TV shows, black material culture defines in particular the U.S. experience. And that's through fashion. We took a tennis shoe and we made it a crown. And we did this in our neighborhoods, in our cities, and our houses. And as they faced challenges, we reclaimed spaces that people didn't want and fought back again when they tried to take that which we had so worked to create into communities. The black body is a particular question. It's always questioned for shapes and the color and the hair, and yet we celebrate the varieties that that brings into the black experience that in many ways makes that blackness so amazing but so elusive and hard to pin down because it comes in so many forms. And that body that moves with the dance and the athleticism of the black spirit, taking a situation where the black body was used and enslaved and seen as there for someone else's purpose or entertainment, and reclaiming that body and that movement and that space really for me intertwines all of the sense of blackness, and that to me goes with the spirit. And that's that sense of revival and a sense of renewal that is so common throughout the black diaspora. That sense of revival and renewal for many is embedded in both genetic and biological, but also spiritual and community notions of family. And that is so real in the black community because you focus so much not just on your given family, but those families that you make, those families that you find, and those families that support you, even if you're someone like me who moves clear across the country. And this is so important because black people are always rejoining that which was ripped apart by enslavement, and thinking of creative and new ways to make the diaspora of black people, the necessary movement of displaced people and people who need to move for opportunity and to get away from racism and discrimination, into something that is not separation but wholeness. And so I argue that social media and Facebook right now are amazing aspects of the black diaspora. What binds us all together for me is our language, the sounds of our voices, and the stories that we tell, both from the linguistic aspects that are the focus of my work, but the voice of my own mother that has told me my entire life, Black is beautiful, Black is beautiful, the mantras that keep us going. And this is the varieties of language that are used throughout the African diaspora and the ways that we think about calling ourselves. So African American, Black, particular nations, really understanding those intertwining ways that we think about Blackness. There's one example that I will give you that I want to just encourage, and this is a documentary called The Language You Cry In. It's a detective story that finds links between African Americans and their past, and it goes from the Gullah Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia all the way back to Sierra Leone, and it shows the amazing work that Black linguists and anthropologists have done to get away from narratives that really suggest that Black culture was broken, that was disrupted by slavery, and showed how people through their language and their culture and their bodies really kept culture together. But you have to know how to see it, you know how to have to look for it, and you have to know how to appreciate it. This work was done by Lorenzo Dow Turner, who was a professor at Howard University. And that really brings me into this idea of the intellect, what I like to refer to for me as Black girl genius. But this legacy is that of historically Black colleges and universities and brave people who created them and sustained them throughout today. And my students, I teach at University of California, Santa Barbara, but I run a program where I'm also constantly teaching students who are at historically Black colleges and universities. And that collective intellect that comes through the work that we do is immeasurable. I would not be the same person, I would not be the same professor without that intersection. And I also think of all the brave students who went to integrate universities and who are still doing that work at schools and universities, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. I think the creativity, the science of making something out of nothing, and making science when that has been so hard to do in the history of Black people is something that we definitely need to celebrate. And that creativity and science also has led to just amazing entrepreneurship under adverse conditions when Blacks were not given the same loans and the same business opportunities. We see that even today with COVID-19, where there were rules put in place that people knew that did not apply to Black people with respect to relationships with particular lenders, and the history of redlining, so Black people could not get the same house loans. But even throughout all of that, people came together as individuals and communities and made businesses happen. So I think something we can particularly do in this Juneteenth time is support Black businesses in real space and online. Support the authors, support the artists, support the scientists, support the companies, support the universities, as acts of celebrating this hard work and this adversarial conditions. That kind of support, that active support that we see through our fundraising is the love, is the Black love that does not die. It doesn't die under slavery. It doesn't die under Jim Crow. It doesn't die under harsh colonialism. It hasn't died under apartheid. It keeps going. It keeps singing. It is the power of our collective voices and our bodies that makes the whole world have an imagination of Black people that we know that we can make you pay attention. We know that from Barack Obama to the current protests, the world watches the Black actions, the individual and collective. And I argue, not just today, but to my students, it is because we are not just the heart of a nation, but we are the soul of a nation. And this isn't because of any inherent qualities of Blackness or thinking that we are more special or more unique than a different group. It is because of the history. It is because of what has happened and how we handled these challenges. It is because of our undying willness to speak up, to stand up, to protest, to speak truth, and claim and demand our inalienable rights. And my argument is without this reckoning, the U.S. is not any more legitimate than the slavery that it was founded on. So I really want to encourage everyone to celebrate Blackness today, learn about it every day. Seek out the variety, seek out the different experiences, seek out the different narratives about what it means for different individuals, different communities, people from different nations, people who have lived in different places at different times, to really think about how Blackness is something that is developmental. So it's always changing. We're learning how to do it. We're socializing people into Black communities. It is dynamic, right? So it's not the same in a given place, in a given time, and people can pass through those experiences in different ways. But there's something about it that is absolutely, for many of us, definitive, right? So we can be from Virginia like I am and move to California and understand that shared collective experience and have cultural practices, linguistic practices, social practices that may overlap and some may be very different, but it's that ethos, that striving for that justice, that striving for freedom, understanding that that is a process that we are now more in control of than ever, and making sure that we hold ourselves to demand more than those crumbs that people gave us, as we look towards the Black magical imagination, what that will mean for our children, for our students, for our communities for years to come. All right, so I'll stop there. I will see if people have questions, suggestions, ideas about things that we can do to really make Juneteenth stronger in different parts of the country and even parts of the world for what it means. And I also have a special question of thinking about topics for future videos. So you all can put those in the comments too. And so now I'll see what's going on in the question box. All right, questions. Hey everybody, thanks for those who are live. Yes, the Lawyers Committee has reached out to us to thank us. They have been so supportive, so active with the fundraiser. They are interested in doing videos with us this summer. They have just been amazing. And our big thing is everything that we can do is today to celebrate them on this Juneteenth and the freedom that they represent. Everything that we can do to support them throughout the summer and through the election cycle to make sure people have those rights that really are still in process, to be able to vote, to be able to do that safely in the time of COVID. I think that is really, what has been so great to work directly with Kristen representing the Lawyers Committee. So I think that's been fantastic. Other questions? It's just a good day to celebrate. Good day to think about ways we can celebrate, right? So not every day has to be just about knowledge, but thinking about ways that Juneteenth could happen in virtual space and ways that Juneteenth can happen when we can all be in physical space together again. I think that's what's so exciting. I have on my Virginia is for Lovers shirt because Virginia just made Juneteenth a state holiday. So something big on my mind is how do we get that spread to other holidays and how do we to other states, and how do we empower people to really look at these symbols of freedom and liberation that are reclaimed and renewed, right, in ways that we really need if we're going to do the next level of work. Tracy says it's a beautiful day. It is a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day all around in concept, and it is a gorgeous day here in Southern California. All right. Well, if no more questions are coming in, I will stop this now. I'll encourage you to share this video with people of all different backgrounds. Share it with your friends. Get their ideas. What makes Blackness special for them? How do they define it? How do they think about it? What dimensions do they want to learn more about? What dimensions would they like to celebrate and support? To me, that is an important aspect of making sure that the Black narrative, the Black experience, as it's told by Black people and others, does not focus on those negative aspects, but focuses on the resilience, the cultural practice, and the joy. Okay, so why is it hard for white people to understand that racism is so ever present? I think it is there's a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons that I really think about as a researcher and an educator is that racism is not taught as a concept comprehensively in American schools. And so students don't know what to look for. They don't see it as something that we can study empirically, qualitatively, that we can look at data. They think about it as a matter of opinion. So that you can not be racist just because you decide that you're not. Or that talking about racism or saying that someone is racist is offensive, right? Without it having this aspect of being real and something that is tangible. And that I think that lack of having that be something that we learn about and think about in that way, and in both our K through 12 and higher education, allows it to be forgotten in waves, right? So one of the big things, if you live in Southern California like I do, is that there have been protests before. There have been 1992 with Rodney King, everybody thought things would change. We now know that change doesn't happen that way, but one of the big things that I know didn't happen is the introduction of classes. Today, the California state system is now saying everyone will take ethnic studies. What does that look like in our universities? How's that going to look in the K-12 systems across the country? I think that's a critical aspect of this. If If you don't learn it, it's easier to forget if you just think it's a matter of conversation or topic every time something maybe comes in the media. Okay? Good question. Thanks so much for coming. And how do we know when the protests are sending or carrying the correct messages of Black lives, your messages? I think that is an excellent question. There's so much information out there. I think one of the things is to look across the messages and understand the varieties of messages, the varieties of ideas, that Black people aren't one political party, Black people aren't one point of view. And what are the things that we maybe disagree on, but what are some of the things that we hold constant across those messages? And then I think it's really important to lead with an idea of justice, an idea of lived experience, and an idea of expertise, right? So part of my job, even with other Black people, is that, I do study this all day. I do think about this all day. And so really thinking about what is the information, what is the knowledge, what is the data, what is the creativity, right? Also, all different ways of thinking, experiencing, and knowing that is leading to that particular message of Black lives, that particular message of how things should be done. And understand that that is, in best case scenario, that is a deliberative process, right? So that conversation that we have about that is the important piece. So no one voice, right? We're over this model of just the one hero or the one leader. I think that's what's so amazing about the Black Lives Matter movement, but it causes us to have to do that work. I do plan on doing more videos. I've gotten suggestions from some people of topics they want to hear in the future. So I'll probably do one about once a week. We're on summer now, so it's a little bit easier for me. So I'll probably do some more topics about advocacy. I'll do some more topics about Black culture and Black lives. And I may even have some of my students come in and share their experiences and their research as well. So definitely look for this in this space. I'll probably do some on YouTube for a while, but I think once our fundraiser gets up a little higher, I'll probably move over to YouTube, just because it's easier to share them and do some things there, but I'll probably do some shorter ones on Facebook throughout the summer. So if you have topics for videos, please let me know. I'm very happy to answer questions. No questions too hard or too silly or whatever. I will try to find the best answer I can. And I am used to answering questions. I think this is something that I care about and have dedicated time to. I have dedicated to answering questions about Blackness from people from different groups at different ages. And I think there's nothing better than being able to teach about racism and to teach about the beauty of Blackness in classes that I do, both to undergraduates in particular and educators, so that they can share this information with others, right? And so here, one topic, the language of resistance. Yeah, that's something I talk about in my classes. So I can definitely do that as a whole half an hour, right? How do you do language of resistance? How do you protest inequality? How do you speak out for justice? And how do you make that heard on the individual level, right? So maybe in your workplace, in your school, or maybe in your own family. And how do you do that in a group? And I can definitely do that as a topic. I think that's an excellent suggestion. I've had another topic that I definitely will do in the next couple of weeks about navigating protest and navigating change if you identify as a member of the Black middle class and you're kind of nervous about how this will work out in your school or workplace. So we'll talk about that. And I think that came to mind as we think we'll overlap with that, with the language of resistance. I'll definitely do some some videos for people who are working with their students or children of different age groups. So how do we talk about these topics and help students learn about this if they are maybe in elementary school, middle school, high school, college? And I'll talk about how do we talk about this with people who may be older, and a lot of this is really new to them. And so how do you do that and make people learn information about racism that's sensitive and Blackness in a way that doesn't embarrass them or devalue their perspective, but kind of move them along in their thinking. Got a good, amazing request to do a video on internalized racism. And that's one of my favorite topics. And as a linguist, that's what I focus on, is when Black people themselves feel like different aspects of their culture, even their language, the way they look, is devalued because of that history of racism. How do I help people reclaim that and even see it, to understand that the thing that most parts of the Black experience have been devalued, mocked, and denigrated in different ways, that we have to put a lens on ourselves, and that ongoing mantra that Black is beautiful. How do we realize that? So these are some amazing topics. Y'all have got me thinking. My summer will be full. I'm running my summer program with students from across the country. I'm going to put these topics to them as we start up Monday, and we'll see what we come up with over the summer. And what I need from you all is to keep donating, keep sharing information about the fundraiser on Facebook, but also let people know they can donate directly. Kristen said a lot of donations have come in directly from people who don't do Facebook, which is fantastic. Share it on Twitter, Instagram. And if you learn something in these videos and you've already donated, even $1 or $2, it makes a difference. It adds up across our thousands of donors. All right. Well, I'll think of one of these topics and see which one I think would be best for next week. I will stop the video now. Have the greatest evening of this Juneteenth ever. We got this. People are listening. People are watching. From politicians to corporations to educators. Put these action plans in place. Get people in these conversations. Think about what they want to do in a timely manner. Pick something small if that's where you are. Learn a little bit. Ask a question. Push further. Ask bigger questions. Demand change if you're in that place. And please, by any means, speak out if you're in the position to do so. We need your voices. We need your signs. We need your writing. We need that right now to keep going. All right, y'all. Happy Friday.